everyone, and a very warm welcome to our 13th edition of Saturday Musings hosted by the Alumni Office. We will start today's program by a keynote address followed by a panel discussion. Professor Shekhar unfortunately could not make it for today's program as he is extremely unwell, and he has sent his regards for the program and apologies for not making it. But we do have an interesting session today lined up and a keynote address by Mr. Parthasarathy on the topic Putting Your Thinking to Work. S Parthasarathy is an engineer and an MBA from the PGP 92-94 batch of IIM Bangalore. He worked with the ITC Classic Finance for 2 years in the merchant banking function after his MBA. Subsequently, he was on his own for over 2 decades and has ideated multiple businesses. He ran a manpower recruitment firm for more than 1 decade. During the early stages of the internet in India, he developed a jobs portal in the 1999-2000 that had many firsts to its credit. In 2008, he developed a web-based software solution for the management of apartment complexes, which was recognized as first of its kind in India. This sector rapidly grew and has multiple players now. In 2011, he developed a web-based software solution to meet the needs of accounting, contacts, and communication needs of micro-entrepreneurs in India. He published his first book through Rupa Publishers in Feb 2018 titled Unmet Needs of Entrepreneurship: Why Entrepreneurs Do What They Want to Do. For the last 2 years, he has been heading the alumni function in IIMB and helped develop many new ideas in his present role. A very warm welcome to you, sir.
Thanks everyone. As Ankita mentioned, Professor Shekhar could not join us. So we quickly put together a session for all of you just to provide a context to this, the whole meeting today. Interestingly, yesterday I attended the annual day function of my kid. I have 2 children, and the younger one goes to she's in the 9th standard. And what I saw, it was a 2-hour performance. It was it's a brigade school, very close by, and it reminded me of children and how creative they are, and how it's pretty much connected to the topic today. They have no inhibitions in terms of exploring new ideas, no fear of failure, but somewhere along the line, once they grow out of the childhood, get into adulthood, something happens and fears, all kinds of emotions set in, and we get into issues. So I was able to connect the session yesterday, the annual day function, and the topic for today. I thought it was pretty much connected. So today's topic, in terms of providing a context to the theme, is putting your thinking to work. So let's understand what exactly is thinking through a small exercise. And I solicit your cooperation on this. Yeah. So here's a quick thing. What is common among the following items? Dogs? Wonderful. Any ideas? Bhutan? Okay. Pond? Monastery? Okay. Mountains? Okay. The next 3 are connected to the second one, lakes. So actually, they're like ponds. They're basically lakes. But what actually happened out here? I set you thinking, right? The first one was quite immediate. You knew it was a dog. It just took you a fraction of a second. But what actually happened there at the back of your mind? It was a concept that you're very familiar with. You have categorized the world, and the categorization of what you experience in the world, ideas or events, etc., it's there in your head. You have logical concepts are essentially where there is a set of rules and procedures that help you define what category that you have to put a new experience into. It's like a triangle. I know a triangle, some of the Euclidean triangle, not spherical triangle. Euclidean triangle, some of the 3 angles 180 degrees, so I come across a figure, I know whether it's a triangle or not. I have a set of rules very clearly defined. So logical set of rules. There's another way of categorizing. It's called it's a natural concept. So what we do out there is, it's fuzzy. The borders are very fuzzy. It's not very clear in terms of how do you categorize. You take a set of attributes, but it's not clear cut like a logical set of rules. And that happens all the time in nature. For example, if I categorize, I see a set of animals from the cat family. So I have something called a cat family. Okay, I describe a concept in my head called the cat family. So I look at an animal, and in my head, I know cat is something that I have defined cat in terms of certain attributes. So I see a new item, and I try to analyze and understand whether it fits into that concept. But the concept itself is not very clear, but it's very helpful. For example, fruit. So you come across something, then you're wondering, is tomato a fruit? Is orange a fruit? Right? So we have concepts where you have logical concepts and you have natural concepts. The second element of thinking is what is referred to as proposition. I know it sounds a bit difficult to understand what that means, but in simple terms, it just means relationship between concepts. So we have multiple concepts in our head. We have categorized. The next thing is how do you relate different concepts. So this concept is something like in programming, you have the OOPS, right? You have classification of the animal kingdom. You have something like a class. You have instantiation of a class which is called an object. The object has a set of features. The class has a set of features. Objects can have features that are unique to themselves. Right? Pretty much similar. It also maps into what there's a theory called logical mathematical types. So it all comes from there. So when you talk about propositions, the whole idea is how do you relate concepts. And language being the common denominator in terms of how we think, we use the word propositions because they connect concepts. If I say, for example, Raju is the father of Varun, I have two concepts called Raju and Varun, and father is the relationship between these two concepts. If I say a dog has a tail, a dog concept is linked to a property attribute called a tail. Right? So when you have these relationships can be between concepts, between attributes. So essentially what we do is we attach a set of attributes to a particular concept, and if something has those attributes, we categorize. So in a head, what happens is there are two things that happen. One is I store the attributes in memory. So when I have a new element, I just check out if they map into the attributes and categorize them. Or number two, very importantly, I look at visuals, images. Images is another way I actually can build relationships between ideas. So mental representations of what I see. The last one is actually images, is the mental representations. So how we actually look at the world, store information through visual, through images. So you can store your experiences using those five sensory experiences as auditory, as visual, kinesthetic, etc. But largely they say it's mental representations through visual channel. So how do you represent what you see in terms of images in your head? Let's do a very simple 10-second experiment. Okay? Just close your eyes. I request you to close your eyes. Just 10 seconds. Now we are in end of November, winter season. Please think about the Himalayas for a moment. Assume that you are on the Himalayas. That's it, open your eyes. So what did you see? Snow? Yeah? Anything else? Ice-clad mountains. Did you see animals? Okay. Did you see the rhododendron, the pine trees? You missed them. Why? Right. So this is about images, or mental representations. So what happens is, the first time when I asked you to think about Himalayas, the first thing that came to your mind was, Himalayas is snow. So you don't have to really work hard. Your brain didn't really have to work. But when I asked you whether you have animals, you really have not thought through that because your mind has to scan through the memory. and that takes an effort. Perhaps had he done this exercise and told you, oh, think, close your eyes once again, think more. What else do you see? Then you start seeing pine trees, rhododendrons, because now you're forcing your brain to work, right? So these are some of the basic elements of thought. Just wanted to put it in context. Okay, here's a simple, let's now dig a little deeper. Now that we know what thinking is all about, concepts, how do you build relationships between concepts, and how do you represent those concepts in your head? Let's do a simple experiment. Here there are two images. There is only one element that's common. Yeah? I'll give you 15 seconds. You can just run through it and see if you can identify. So I already can hear a yeah out there. So, yeah. Now, this is basically, I'm trying to relate the idea of concepts. How do you build concepts? How do you categorize? What is it that is going to help you categorize the world? So this is related to that idea. Yeah? So quickly, any? Yeah? Pin? Pin is there? Okay. Triangle is repeating. Okay, maybe. But it's very simple. So you said triangle. No, square. No, I think it's a triangle, right? Triangle is there in both the places. Where tilted? I'm not able to see it. Yeah, there's a square out here. There's no square out here. No, that's a diamond. That's a diamond. But how long did it take for you? Did the others get it as yet? I'm sure some of you probably have still not got it because your mind is checking out. So how is your mind processing? Did you take one object at a time and say, okay, this is one object. Can I look at the right-hand side and check if it's there or not? Did you go line by line, column? You have used some kind of algorithm to do it, but you're not conscious about it, right? But this is again related to the power of observation. I'll just come to the next slide.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered for a smart. Who? The precisely three persons on the top of the room was brutally murdered to death. That's not the I want you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was in dark, not
Are you buckling the book of stones?
So there you are, the power of observation, just to illustrate how we can easily miss something. Now, how do I go back? This is okay. So this video is essentially to let you know about the power of observation. So if you want to categorize the world in terms of concepts, the mental categorization, one of the first things you need to develop is the power of observation. So how do you develop the power of observation? So, this reminds me interestingly of what Jiddu Krishnamurti mentioned about observation. He says, to observe without judgment is probably the highest form of intelligence. Now, something to ponder about, but that's what he says. Here's another one. What do you see in this? Have a quick look at this. 10 seconds, 20 seconds. So what do you see? Okay. Yeah, there is one on the mobile phone, yeah. Pardon? Huh? Okay, they're disconnected in their own worlds, yes. Okay, waiting to eat. Okay. 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 Anything else? Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Now here, some of you, very evidently, you know what observation is all about. So some of you just describe what you're seeing. You said that you can see trees in the background, someone is holding a mobile, but a few others are passing judgments. When you say, for example, they're disconnected, that's a judgment you're passing, right? So you said something and someone else said something else, right? The board. So essentially this is to just let you know the difference between observation and evaluation. So we do observe. When you observe, you assess, right? And then you take action. Then you react to a situation. But to split the observation and evaluation is a very difficult task. It's not all that easy. For example, when I'm speaking, I said difficult task. Difficult is an evaluation. Something that is hard, for example, if you say it's an evaluation, right? That's your point of view. That's how you're evaluating. To actually split the two and to be aware that observation is different from evaluation is kind of not very easy and doesn't come very naturally. But what do you think would be the advantage of trying to split these two? Essentially, when you observe something, it opens up a lot of choices to you without any prejudices. You don't impose your own belief systems on your observation. And if you're able to split the observation and evaluation, it opens up a lot of more spaces and choices for you. That's the message. Okay? Observation is essentially enhanced awareness. So to put your thinking to work, and because thinking is what the whole session is all about, the first step is to have an enhanced awareness. And awareness is not just about the visual system, it's also about auditory, about the kinesthetic, the olfactory, etc. Yeah, this is just a quick note on what observation is all about. Okay, here's a quick diagram. You can visualize this because you don't have a paper. Some of you would have done it in school or just out of interest. Yeah? You just have to draw 4 straight lines through the 9 dots without retracing and without lifting your pen. If you know it, it's going to come in a flash. If not, you'll have to think through it. Yeah? Here's the solution. Right? Just quickly wanted to illustrate the fact that sometimes when we have problems, we impose certain constraints on them. Some of these constraints actually stop us from looking at different solutions. Right? We just need to be aware of the way we think. Here's a quick quiz. Who can tell me where is Papua New Guinea? Yeah? Okay. Who was the first president? Rajendra Prasad? Wonderful. So all of you are good at quizzing. So in which year did India first win the Cricket World Cup? Okay. What is the name of the first human to step on moon? Neil Armstrong. And the last. Okay, great. So some more, let's continue. What makes an airplane fly? Okay. Okay, fine. You can think for yourself. You can say it aloud. What makes the decimal number system better than Roman numerals? Why do we have only 7 days to a week? Yeah. we had 2 slides. What do you think was the difference between slide 1 and slide 2? Yeah. Yeah? Okay. Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. So the first one is basically about factual information. That's how quizzes happen, right? All you have to do is remember. You have to retrieve something from memory and spew it out. That's the lower order thinking skills. You don't have to put in too much effort. You just have to mug up facts, and there you are. And these are, like someone said, these are open-ended. They're going to make you think. How did something happen? What will happen if something doesn't happen, right? So why do we go to school? It makes you think, makes you reflect, step back. Okay. So here I just wanted to highlight when it comes to thinking, one of the skills that can be really important is questioning. How do you question? Questioning is questioning the status quo, what is and what is not. What if? How else? So the why question, for example, we had a question on why. Until the time the why is focused on behavior, skills, it's okay. But if the why question starts attacking the identity level, identity of an individual, you are not going to get a great answer. You're just going to get a pushback. Okay? Why did you do this? Okay? So the first response you're going to get, suppose children or for anyone else, is a defense. A why is a fairly aggressive question, especially if it attacks the identity of a person. So the why questions can be converted into a what. What is it about this thing that is important to you? Why is it important to you? The same question, said differently, you will get different kinds of responses. There are some responses, there are some questions that can be threatening to the individual because you're attacking the identity. At some level, you're telling him you're a fool, right? So the why questions, you need to be careful about how we use the why questions. Here, the whole point is, how do I promote questioning skills in children? For example, let's say children, for ourselves too. Questioning. And the reason, the kind of questions that you'll be asking is to generate possibilities, divergent thinking. The more the number of choices, the assumption is better for you because you can generate more ideas. So this is the second for thinking, to make thinking work for you. Second skill that you want to develop is questioning skills. Now quickly, suppose I take this object, any 2 objects, this, and say this, 2 objects I have. Is there something in this object that I can make use in object 2 that will make this better? Can you think of anything? Yeah? Okay, vertical. Oh, okay, wonderful. Anything else? See, that's an interesting observation, yeah? Okay. Okay, wonderful. So that's also wonderful. So what he's saying is, this is transparent. Can I know the battery life and some kind of a marker out here from where I can understand, what's happening inside? Okay. Similarly, is there something in this product that I can use in this object that will make this object better in what it does? Okay. Okay. This is by expressing. Okay. Oh, this one, the blue one? Okay, interesting. Okay. Okay, sure. So that's very interesting. You already came up with so many different ideas when you were asked the question. So when someone asks you, then you probably let your mind think. What did you do out here is what we said, the elements of thinking. You had different concepts, you need to relate them, right? So you're trying to find a relationship between things which don't seem to be related. So that is something, that's a skill that you'd want to develop if you want your thinking to work for you, right? Cognitive skills association. So one is, the first point that I made is about, one was about questioning skills, right? Observation, observation is not just visual, using all your sensory acuity. And third is, the first two are more to do with behavior. This is more to do with mental, cognitive association, skills association. How do you relate objects? If you do all this, 15 minutes, yeah? If you do all this, this could happen to you. Let's have a quick look at the video. I think there's no sound in this. There's no sound, there's no sound. So this is a learning from nature. You look at the elephant's trunk and then you come out of the robotic arm and you learn from the nature around you. That's what a lot of inventions are basically based on the trigger comes from nature. The whole idea is to do all this, if you can develop those skills and make the thinking work for you, develop observation skills, questioning skills, and skills of association. What we also refer to as divergent thinking, where you're able to generate more choices for yourself. If you do all of that, in all possibility, you can also do this. You can come up with interesting devices and products and ideas in different walks of life. Thank you so much. Sensory acuity is how do you hear better? How do you see better? Okay, let me ask you a simple question now. What dress? Close your eyes. What's the color of the dress you're wearing? Red? Open your eyes. Is it red? Yeah, that's observation. How many holes are there in your shoes to tie a shoelace? 10? Are you sure? Just count. Yeah? There are no shoes. Okay. Yeah. So, but obviously we all have selective attention. You know, that doesn't mean that you're not really, your sensory acuity is not high. It is just that you want to see what you want to see. That's not probably very important for you. You just have to wear something and come. But the idea is, if you can do this deliberate thinking, where you become very conscious about what you see around you, it can help you increase your sensory acuity. It's like fine tuning. It's like calibration, right? If you're listening to sounds, can I close my eyes and just for a moment listen to all the sounds around me? So what happens is you become more aware of all kinds of sounds around you. What you see, what you hear, the smells around you, right? The movement around you, right? So that's one, and there are many techniques for this. So what you can deliberately use to improve your skills for observation, yeah. So it's been a pleasure. I just wanted to put the whole today's theme into context by introducing the idea of thinking versus related to creativity. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, sir. That was indeed insightful. We would now like to start our panel discussion, and in the panel we have Dr. Pavan Soni. Dr. Pavan Soni is a PhD from IIM Bangalore and an innovation evangelist by profession and also a teacher by passion. He is the founder of Inflexion, a strategy and innovation consulting. Dr. Pavan has consulted with Fortune 500 companies including 3M, Amazon, General Electric, Qualcomm, Samsung, and others. Dr. Pavan was the only Indian to be shortlisted for the prestigious FT and McKinsey Bracken Bower Award for the Best Business Book of the Year 2016. He has also been invited 5 times to speak at the TEDx. He has also delivered a distinguished guest lecture on innovation culture at ISRO. He is a gold medalist from MBM Engineering College, Jodhpur, and he did his PG from NITIE Mumbai. He is also an adjunct faculty at ISB Hyderabad, IIM Lucknow, and IIM Bangalore. He is also a coach at the NSR cell of IIM Bangalore. A very warm welcome to you, sir.
Pound.
On our panel, we have Ms.Anju Kadam. She is an alumni of the MPWE program at IIMB. She is a communications professional and has helped companies and brands with their messaging to become effective and focused. She is the founder and chief nurturer of the 100 Sari Pact, a platform for voices of women to build the narrative of their lives through the medium of a sari. She is the founder and director of Web TV. She is a TED speaker and also a fitness enthusiast and urges women to take charge of their health and fitness in the role of a Pinkathon ambassador. A mentor, as she mentors on the Shura's platform, she encourages women to rejoin workforce after a break and makes the second innings count. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am. We also have on the panel today Ms. Shruthi Harikrishna. She's an alumni of class of PGP 2009 from IIMB and has over 14 years of experience across strategy and consulting and analysis. She currently manages analytics for the APAC organization at Adobe. She also writes short stories, articles for newspapers. She's an avid blogger and has over 200 blogs and has over 30 Zentangle pieces. She has over 50,000 readers in the popular parenting site, and her blog was chosen among the top 10 articles in the year 2015. Ms. Shruthi is a university rank holder during her engineering and is a Karnataka state rank holder in class 12. She was among the top 20 in the country during entry into the CAT-based PGDM degree at IIM Bangalore. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am. Today's panel discussion will be moderated by Ms. Sudha Balajee. Ms. Sudha Balajee is a chartered accountant and partner in SV Shetty and Associates. She is a certified forex and treasury manager and certified forensic accountant and information systems auditor. She is also a visiting faculty in various B schools. She is the immediate past director of District 92 of Toastmasters International, overseeing the running of over 240 clubs across Karnataka and Kerala. She has been the president of IIMB Orators Club. Ms. Sudha has completed a management program for women entrepreneurs from IIMB. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am.
A very warm morning to one and all present here. And Dr. Parthasarathy started with asking a difference between or how can we connect with the mic and the water bottle. I would just tell the panelists, please use the mic. If you don't use the mic, you will have to use the water bottle quite often. So on that note, let me start this panel discussion with just a small quote of Steve Jobs. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently, the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who can do it. And here we have an esteemed panel of members who have thought differently and who have made the first step in changing the world. So today the topic is, where do ideas come from? So before we actually throw upon the questions, let me just brief you about how the panel discussion will be going on. We will have few starting remarks by all the panelists. We will have few questions to start with, and then it will be thrown open to the audience for their interactions. So please keep your questions ready. Let the questions be small and a statement form. We will not prepare a thesis here so that we can complete or maybe take the advantage of the maximum questions that can be covered in the panel discussion. So to start with, I will just ask all the esteemed members here sitting on the panel to share their personal ideas of what idea creation was for them and in their personal life, how does it matter for them and what have they done in their workspace or in their personal life in idea creations. We will start with Dr. Pavan Soni.
Okay, so so I want to touch upon three things to begin with. The first is that how is creativity different from the another common word that we've been using called innovation. The second point would be, how is creativity not same as intelligence? Because we often end up confusing intelligence with creativity. And the third thing, doing justice to the panel that we have, is I want to give you a scientific explanation why women are more creative than men. So that will give me bonus 2 minutes. So first thing first, innovation and creativity. Now, in the corporate chores, we have been using these two words quite interchangeably, and if not that, then we bake in another words like invention, innovation, R&D, ideas, etc. I think it's very important for us to understand that innovation is not same as creativity. To begin with, what is creativity? Creativity is the ability of an individual, such as yourself, or a group of individuals to generate ideas which are novel and useful. Which means that creativity has to have these two conditions, which is novelty and utility. If something is not novel, it is nothing but common sense. And if something is not useful, then it is nothing but daydreaming. And hence, creativity is neither common sense nor daydream. So there is some threshold to it. Now let us move on to what is innovation. Innovation is the ability of an organization, and not of an individual, of an organization to commercialize new ideas. Which is to say that creativity is about generating ideas, innovation is about commercializing ideas. And we should never ever assume that if you are running an organization or a startup, creativity is it. It's just a starting point. Many times organizations have really grown big by commercializing somebody else's ideas as well. A good example is of course Steve Jobs. And he very famously, eloquently said that good artists steal. But he also said that great artists ship. So shipping is always more important than creation. That's the first bit. The second thing is about intelligence versus creativity. And now why this topic is very, very critical is because any organization that you work for or run, you have always hired people based upon their intelligence. Right from the moment they take birth, we need 70% marks. The problem is that we hire for intelligence, but we expect creativity. Am I right? We are only looking at the intelligence of the person, that how many times he has scored some amazing marks, etc. Even in CAT, by the way, we are essentially looking at intelligence, that in a very short amount of time. But we expect people not to be intelligent, but to be creative. And in the advent of artificial intelligence, I think the scariest thing that we'll be left with is creativity. So I wanted us to use this board, for depicting the point. Do we have a marker by any chance? Oh yeah, there's a marker. Okay, so if you can follow me on the screen very quickly, without much ado, tell me what's coming next. Okay, tell me what's coming next. What's next? What's next? Inverted U? Okay, cool. What's coming next? This one? What's coming next? What can come next? C? Can anything else come here? Can anything else come? That's it? Only C can come? Cannot U come here instead of this? Or can the inverted U come here instead of this? Now what happened was that in this particular case, you very quickly told me this is coming. In this particular case, you told me very much this is coming. But whereas in this particular case, we had a couple of options. What's the difference between question 1, 2 and question 3? Pattern recognition. Correct? You could recognize patterns here, but there was no pattern to recognize here. Now, if you look at any IQ test, and I would strongly encourage, being a Saturday, you might want to go back home and take an IQ test. Any IQ test is nothing more and nothing less than checking your pattern recognition abilities. Now, if intelligence is about finding a pattern, what is creativity? If intelligence is about finding a pattern, what is creativity? Yeah, before creating a pattern, it is about breaking the pattern. Now, how easy or difficult it is for us to break a pattern? Is it easy or difficult? Very difficult, am I right? Just to demonstrate how difficult it is to break a pattern, all of you just fold your hands like this. Right, and check which hand is above, left or right. Yeah, depends upon. There's nothing biologically correct or incorrect. Yeah. So in my case, it is in that hand. Now just straighten up your hands like this, relax. And once again, fold your hands. This time, the other hand has to come above. Other hand. Now, was it easy? It was not easy. For such a trivial thing, we have a pattern. It doesn't serve any utility, by the way. There's no utility of this, whether this is better than this, there's no utility, but still we have patterns. So what happens, the reason why we have so many patterns in our lives for everything almost, right from brushing up the teeth to which side of the bed you wake up, henceforth and so on. The beauty of pattern is that patterns reduce cognitive load. That's why we have patterns. The very fact that we've been surviving, where our brain that requires 20% of the oxygen in the body, whereas it weighs about 6.5% in terms of body weight, generally speaking. The reason is that our brain functions because we have patterns. Patterns are difficult to break. Humans are slaves of patterns. These stars which are spread out billions of light years away are not standing any pattern, but we mere mortals always find patterns. And hence, intelligence is about creating, finding, following, and predicting a pattern. Whereas what is creativity? Breaking and recreating the patterns. And as you just saw yourself, breaking pattern is non-trivial, especially with machines coming in. So never confuse intelligence with creativity, never confuse innovation with creativity. Now let's go to the third and the juicier part, which is women and creativity. Now, for long we have had this notion that human brain has two halves, the left half and the right half. Except that in people like me, there is nothing left in the right half and there is nothing right in the left half. But let us live with this assumption for the time being, that there is a right half, the right hemisphere, and the left hemisphere. The right hemisphere of human brain is accountable for what we call as your feelings, and the left hemisphere is accountable for thinking. So let's call this the feeling brain and the thinking brain. Now, the assumption for a while has been that most of your cognitive abilities come from the right half of the brain. But now with fMRIs, etc., CT scans, people have increasingly been realizing that it is neither the left nor the right, but it is the prefrontal cortex, this part of the brain, which is accountable for creativity. It's not this or this, it is this part of the brain, which is that brain requires you to assimilate what is feasible and what is practical for it to be really called creative, which is again going back to the novelty and the utility part of it. Now, the two halves of the brain are connected by a cord called the corpus callosum. Corpus callosum is more or less like the umbilical cord that connects the mother to the child at the time of birth. The corpus callosum in a woman is 2 times as thick as in a man. 2 times. So if men's corpus callosum is this, a women's corpus callosum is 2 times as thick. Which means what? In a very practical sense, it means that women find it very difficult to think without feeling. Feelings are always embedded in their thinking. And the corollary is that they cannot feel without thinking. So thinking without feeling and feeling without thinking is almost impossible for a woman. And as a result, and I'll again connect it back to creativity in a little while from now, as a result what happens is that they're always evaluating and generating ideas simultaneously. Whereas something that we'd never advocate, that generating ideas and evaluating ideas should be 2 separate exercises, separated by time and intent, and not should be done simultaneously. Whereas a man can very easily, and we have had so many examples, right from warfare to sports to back home, men very easily can mute their feelings when they are thinking, and can very easily mute their thinking when they are feeling. And as a result, they get quickly very carried away. Coming back to the corporate context, which most of us are most interested in, though it's an academic institution, but we need to have non-academic debates as well. So from a very practical perspective, what is very critical is the importance of diversity. Diversity not just in terms of gender. Gender is the most fault line diversity, which is highly visible, but all the nuanced diversities that we have in. And diversity, needless to say, encourages creativity. So my parting thoughts, 3 things: that while the big question is that can creativity be taught? The answer is no. To the question that can creativity be learned? The answer is an affirmative yes. Which is to say that creativity cannot be taught, but creativity can be learned. And that's a hope that all of us have right now. 3 takeaways, if you can chew upon. The first thing is that for you to be creative, keep in mind that creativity is nothing more and nothing less than a skill. Like swimming, like cooking, like dancing, like painting, creativity is nothing but a skill. Can it be practiced? It can be. How do you practice creativity? The first thing is have multiple affiliations, which is try to pack your life with as many identities as you can have. Like of a teacher, like of a singer, you're learning Bharatnatyam somewhere, you are learning cooking classes somewhere else, you are joining weekend classes at IIM Bangalore, you're helping organize a blood donation camp, you're trekking to some hill station on the weekends. Pack your life with multiple dimensions. That's point number 1. The second point is Be experimentative. Be experimentative in the clothes you wear, the food you eat, the places you go to, the movies you watch, the books you read, the people you meet, and the way you carry out your day. Be experimentative. And the third, and in my opinion, the most important skill that you need to have to be creative is to have a thick skin. Moti chamdi. You need to have a thick skin. Very important. Because if you get so perturbed when people ridicule you, be rest assured that you will never ever think of anything but mediocrity. Have a thick skin. Right from Abraham Lincoln to Mahatma Gandhi to John Kennedy, all these loved people had people hating them so much so that they were shot at a point blank range. It's only because of thick skin that Donald Trump rules the roost out there. Have a thick skin. Which is to simply say, and I'll pause at this moment, which is to simply say that don't take yourself seriously. Don't take yourself seriously. You know, because don't take yourself seriously because nobody takes you seriously. Nobody takes you seriously. So take it easy. Take it easy. Pack your life with multiple activities and experiment on a daily basis, because who knows what, today may be your last day. So be creative. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Pavan, and thank you for reassuring that women are more creative. On that ground, I will take it a little further, and feelings and thinking goes parallelly. Can Anju talk a little bit more about how emotions play a crucial role in creativity and your personal experience of linking this both?
First of all, thank you, Pavan, for putting all the pressure on me to be creative. I'm going to, so you want me to link emotions and creativity? Wow, just jumping straight in. I'll begin with telling you a little bit about what I do. I'm a communications professional. I make films. I use the medium of films to tell stories, and the stories could be stories of brands, could be story. It's basically effective messaging through films, and I don't make advertisements. Creativity, I think I'll go back to where ideas come from. And I don't. I think that if ideas are not creative, then they don't spread. So I'm going to take one step back and say, where do ideas come from? Sometimes in my profession, ideas come from a deadline. It's as simple as that. You know, we need to make this, we need to do this. Ideas come from pressure sometimes to just, and Professor actually illustrated that very well in his just before this in the talk, where he said when you're putting a little bit of pressure on your mind to think further, that is when you do push the boundary and think further. You know, the illustration about what do you observe, and if you told us to think a little more, then you actually began to sort of peel the layers off. And I think that ideas come from the power of what I call the power of the pause. Only when you are able to pause and think, and ideas, I thought I would make a grand statement when I came on stage, and I'm still going to make my grand statement, even though he took the Mickey out of it. I think ideas come from pregnancy, and ideas come from the gestation that is required in pregnancy. In terms of the pause, like I said, pregnant pause, or just sitting with something, mulling over it, meeting people, talking to people, doing different things, you know, playing with that idea, juggling it, smashing it, recreating it. Ideas come from being able to engage with them, being able to engage with other people with that idea. And I don't think, even if, you know, and actually there have been studies that even our great philosophers, the eureka moments, the apple falling from the tree and all the rest of it, when people actually studied their notes, they saw that they had actually arrived at those ideas. It's just that the bing bing, the aha moment came where they connected those dots. That's when it became the idea, but the germ of the idea was always there. In terms of emotion and creativity, like I said, I wear many hats, but I'm going to talk about the 100 Sari Pact here. I've also been called, I think, to talk about the 100 Sari Pact. It came from the 100 Sari Pact, for those who don't know, was a movement that began in 2015, where simply I said that I would wear a sari 100 times, not 100 saris, but saris 100 times through the year, which would be about twice a week. And because I am a storyteller, I would tell the story of the saris, because I really do believe that every sari has a story. And in the Indian context, there are very few Indian women who do not already have saris. So I thought I'd honor them and wear them, get them out of the wardrobe. We've been sitting at the back. I'd also given into convenient dressing, not necessarily Western dressing. I want to make this point very clear. But convenient dressing, throw them into the machine wash, wear, go out. So I thought I would actually air and wear the saris that I had. This was a germ of an idea that was actually sitting in the back of my head for a while, and I'll tell you why. Because I was actually training for the Oxfam 100-kilometer walk. The Oxfam runs a walk. It's an NGO. It runs it's their outreach program. You basically collect funds and then you walk for 100 kilometers, and people pledge money. And I was doing that, and I was almost always even on the weekends, which is when we used to do our long walks of 20, 30, 40, 50 kilometers, and trying to get the body ready. I used to be in tights and a t-shirt and my shoes, and I would say, I really want to look pretty. I'm sorry, but it came from vanity. But that's my point, that the idea of the 100 Sari Pact was not sitting up one day and saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to change the world. To my delight, it became a movement that people joined into. It really came from a very simple idea of me saying, I want to wear my saris. I put it up on social media being the amplifier that it is. People joined in and it became a movement. And again, delightfully, it became a movement of urban women wearing saris who are on social media. Of course, there was a fallout effect of that also. Other women also joined in. But essentially, women who could share their stories on social media. And it also became a platform of storytelling of urban women and their lives. And I say this often, the sari became a medium of storytelling. Very soon, it stopped being about the sari. By the third comment on social media, it was about the nani ka achar that you had this morning, or it was about my first pay, or it was about, I was treated like this and I liked it, or I was treated like that and I didn't like it. It was about stereotypes. It was about gender identity. It was about all kinds of things. So when you talk about creativity and emotion, I really find that the emotion factor of the 100 Sari Pact was just so high. We actually formed a community, the last that I know, because again, like I said, the multiplier effect works in so many ways. We were about 10 lakh women around the world telling our stories through our saris, that I know of. And it was emotion backed. It was emotion about a mother. It was emotion about a father. It was about my first sari. It was about my graduation sari. It was about, I'm wearing this sari and I feel kick-ass today. It was all emotion driven. So, and really, the wonderful part was that it was such a positive sort of spark that came into most of our lives that we felt, and I use this hashtag very often on social media. I hashtag everything saying we are all connected. And I think that I don't think anyone on this panel will disagree with that. In whatever sphere of work that we do, what you do will impact at least one more person. In the 100 Sari Pact, it impacted so many more women. I have women who write back to me saying, you pulled me out of the brink of depression because of the 100 Sari Pact. It humbles me. It humbles me, the kind of effect that I've had on people, that we have had on people. It's not just me. If it was just me, I would be sitting in my drawing room looking very pretty. But because of the fact that more people joined in, it only becomes a movement when people join you. Otherwise, you can be dancing on a beach, all alone. But really, the emotion in the way people wrote their stories creatively really, really was the cornerstone of building a community, I feel. And I really think that if there is no emotion in your idea, it doesn't catch on.
Thank you. We move on to Shruthi. What do you feel? Where does idea come from, but how do people generate new ideas?
Okay, that's great. I had actually come, thinking about this because the topic was given to me. And I'm going to cover two ends of a spectrum, right? One end is you have these idea fairies that are, swimming around your head that make fully grown men run out naked on the streets crying, "Eureka, Eureka." That's on one end. The other end of the spectrum is somebody who practices, gets something to perfection, a creative masterpiece that nobody else has seen, right? And they're two ends of the spectrum. Now, I've lived in the corporate world for too long, so I love three-letter acronyms, and I've got three-letter acronyms for both ends of the spectrum. The first end, I've got an acronym which says YES, and the Y in the YES is sort of a recursive definition. Say yes to things that come your way. Right? So when someone told me, "Do you want to be part of this panel discussion?" I said, "Well, it's completely unrelated to what I do. Am I going to do a good job? What am I going to say?" The focus was all internal. Then I just flipped it around. I said, look at the panel. Look at the sort of people that are coming in. I'm going to get idea fairies that are, roaming around each one of their heads, and I'm going to, gather something from them. The motivational speaker, Jim Rohn, had made a really interesting statement. He said, "You are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with." And if I were to look at the average of the 5 people that I spend time with today, wow, it's been a good day, right? But that's still slightly reactive. Life is throwing some experience at my way, and I'm saying yes to it. The second letter of the acronym, the YES, E is experiment and experience, right? So you are being more proactive, and you say, I had this thing about I want to learn something new every year. Then I realized learning something new every year is too short a time frame to pick up anything in depth. So I changed this to learn something new every 2 or 3 years and go to depth so you understand it at least to a certain level. Could be picking up a language, could be solving the Rubik's Cube, could be horse riding, could be baking. What it does, it enhances the network of neural roots within your head. You're used to taking a certain neural path, and that's the path you repeatedly take, and your ideas are of a certain format. Now, the moment you experience these different things, like Dr. Pavan was saying, talk to different people, hang out with people from different areas, travel, try new foods, you're giving your brain those additional neural paths to take, right? And the last one, the S, is share your ideas. A lot of times when you have a really good thought, your first thought is, "Oh my God, this is a brilliant idea. I'm not going to tell anyone. I'm going to get it patented, or I'm going to make money out of it, or I'm going to get 50,000 hits because of this brilliant idea." But if you think of an idea as a network where you're saying, I give an idea, someone else adds on top of that, and a third person adds a third thing, like your 100 sari pact, start with one person and you have 10 lakh women joining, it becomes a movement. And the idea from what it was, the little seed, to that beautiful plant that it becomes is really about thinking about an idea as a network, not in isolation, right? So that was one end of the spectrum. Yes, fairly easy. The other end of the spectrum is a nice little acronym, which is PPP. And what does it stand for? Practice, practice, and more practice, right? Now I have this beautiful story. I went to this monastery in Nepal where a monk is given the same painting to paint every day of his life. So he wakes up one morning and he said, paint an apple. So he paints an apple. He wakes up the next morning and he says, paint an apple. So he paints an apple. Now the theory is that as he progresses along the path of his meditation, the quality of his apple improves, right? Now they've shown one monk's work in the monastery. He was tasked with painting a wheel of a chariot. So in the beginning of his life, it was a simple, plain-looking wheel of a chariot, the way you'd expect it to look. But towards the end of his life, that wheel had encapsulated the circle of life and death, Buddha's teachings, how people in those times lived. The level of intricacy was unbelievable. So there's a creative masterpiece that was born out of repetitive practice, day in and day out, doing the same thing, right? I have another story, and I think it's linked very closely to what she said. So Darwin, when he came up with his theory of natural selection, in his autobiography, he says, I was sitting in my study, October 1839, I think it was, and I had this aha moment, and there was the theory of natural selection. So there was this one scientist who went back to look at his work, and he was very, Darwin was known to have copious amounts of notes, right? He had pages and pages of notes. So when the scientist went and read his notes, he realized that for months and months together, before he had that aha moment on the October of 1939, he had that theory in those pages. It read like a textbook on natural selection. So those ideas were hovering around. Thank you. Yeah, so for for months together, those ideas were hovering around, and then he jots it down, he's practicing, and the idea bears fruition in, an aha moment, right? And the last story that I'm going to link is a monk, made this beautiful speech who said that you get better at anything that you practice, right? You practice complaining, you get better at complaining. You practice being grateful, you get better at being grateful. You practice at, thinking of new things, you get better at that. You practice writing, you get better at writing, right? Whatever you want to choose. Someone asked that question, how do I improve my observation? Practice, like the way he asked, how many, holes does my shoe have? What colored shirt am I wearing? Do that on a regular basis and you're naturally doing it better. And the last takeaway I have, so when I say these two, I started by saying two ends of the spectrum. Maybe it's not a spectrum, maybe it's a circle and it's continuous, right? One thing comes off of the other. You've got that spark, maybe it comes from a lot of practice, or maybe you practice based on the spark that you get. So it's like the circle really, and not two ends of a spectrum. So, yeah.
Thank you, Shruthi. Moving on from where she left. Professor Parthasarathy is a serial entrepreneur. So he has been connected with new ideas. So I would just like to ask him one thing. Do you feel idea generation is a flash of insight, or is it a slow preparatory, or both? And is there any recurrent pattern for getting ideas? Do you get ideas in a specific pattern like this, or you create your own pattern? And how do you create new entrepreneurial journey?
Being the last among the panelists gives me a few advantages. So I was making a few notes where I can expand on some of their thoughts and add my own thoughts to it. In terms of the flash, I think she mentioned, there are two panelists who actually mentioned about whether it's a flash. She mentioned about the Charles Darwin's. So essentially most of these ideas are not flashes, it's already there. It just takes some time for it to actually emerge. And there could be a trigger at a particular point in time. Maybe you see something that triggers, but the seeds are pretty much there. Recounting my own experience of idea generation, let me, I'll have to go back in time. In 2008, I developed a software for the management apartment complexes. Now, what is a context? Context is pretty simple. I was the treasurer of a fairly large apartment complex. I was the founding treasurer. It was a 1,000 apartment complex. And we didn't have a software in India. So we set up a committee. I never worked in the IT industry. I learned coding on my own because in 2000, with a small team, we had developed jobs portal. So I thought we could probably do this. It's pretty simple. And we set up a committee, and as committees go, we gave them 45 days time, nothing happened. And I thought, let me do it. So I actually literally sat in my bedroom and coded the whole beta version. So we had an up and running version in 3 months' time, which actually worked. And it's been working for 10 years now. And then subsequently, you had a lot of media attention, and then now that's a fairly large sector. Now, going back to the point, where did the seed of the idea come from? It came from your own experience, right? So sometimes when you encounter a problem and you think you have a solution and you want to do something, so that's one of the ways of doing something. You have a Band-Aid, you know how the Band-Aid was actually invented. So if you come across a problem in your day-to-day life and you think you have a solution which is better than the existing solutions, you want to do something about it. That's one way. Another experience I had was in 2011 when we developed another software for management of software to manage accounting, receivables management, contacts management, and communication for micro enterprises in the services sector. Now, the germination of that idea, we were the 2-3 founders. Our spouses were running small mom and pop businesses. But what we realized was they didn't have a way of keeping track of the accounts,
who are my customers, how do I get in touch with them, I sell something, that's about it, right? So, and Tally was a overkill for them. Tally was a overkill, accounting software, QuickBooks was a overkill. Any software that requires certification is tough. Right? So that's the way you look at it. Now here, so then we built an application which addresses that problem. If you look at where did the idea come from, it is not from a personal experience, but by observing others. So we did the immersion studies. We actually went to exhibitions, women entrepreneurs, and we tried to understand what is the problem that they're going through. And then we developed a solution. So ideas come in my own personal experience. One is my own experience, and one is vicarious, what others go through, and then you say, okay, hey, there's something out here. Do I have something to offer? There are multiple ways of generating ideas. Models and frameworks are something that many of us actually build frameworks. So right now in the Alumni Association office, we've built an alumni engagement model, which comes from the fact that, you know, we were trying to think through what we're actually doing. And is there some sense that we can derive from the multiple activities that we're doing? And we developed an engagement model. Now the model in itself is it's combining various ideas, but that comes from imagination. So you can actually build solutions by imagining things. Need not be from your physical experience. I just wanted to highlight the fact that models and frameworks can come from that space to just pure imagination, relativity, pure imagination, not personal experience. So that's another way to generate ideas. There are a few other points which were very interesting the other panelists touched upon. I'll just quickly touch upon that, about emotions and creativity. Now, this is very interesting because if you look at the kind of emotions, especially when you get into creative process, the pleasure of challenges, right? So the pleasure element, the emotion element, when you're faced with the challenge, if you have that in you, when you think challenges are pleasurable, you're in that specific zone of creativity. Another thing is how do you manage anxiety? You know, when you're anxious about something, how do you manage that? Now that is again linked to creativity, and I'll tell you why. Do I get, for example, you ask yourself, do I get anxious when you have an exam which has open-ended questions vis-a-vis MCQ? When I was, during my school days, I'm not sure how many of you are aware that the IIT entrance exam had MCQ and open-ended questions. So you actually had to write, you had to actually describe and solve equations, and you can't mug up questions, right? So there you are. Are you comfortable with the unknown territory? So how do you manage anxiety? Coming to the emotions part. So another interesting insight into the role of emotions is apparently research has shown that heightened states of emotions are not conducive to creativity. Heightened anxiety levels, heightened excitement. So a kind of emotional state that could be conducive to creativity is a state of relaxation, right? In a zone, there are some people who come back and say, look, I got a great idea when I was under the shower, right? So in a very relaxed state of mind, or you're sitting in a hill station somewhere and aha, something comes out. That's another quick point. And I just noted a few other, and another interesting point I think which Pavan mentioned about is about the IQ testing, you know, and what happens when we begin to standardize things. He referred to the intelligence and multiple intelligence and all that stuff. But there is one very important thing that happens in our schools too, conformity. We are all geared towards conformity. You know, if you have a teacher in a classroom, she wants to check out in the bell curve, can I get the children who are on the lower end, do I get them to the median? Conformity actually helps in the evolutionary process of human beings. Because we conform, we collaborate. But for the cause of creativity, it becomes a bit of a challenge because independent thinking is something that is not aligned to the idea of conformity. So conformity in schools, for example, there's a lot of focus on convergent thinking. How do I find an answer to a problem? It's problem solving. It's not about choices generation. It's not about divergent thinking. How do I generate choices? The focus is on convergent thinking. And that is not very conducive to the creative process.
Thank you, Professor. One of the panelists is in a hurry. He has to leave by 12. So I would just ask one question to him and then I will open the floor to all of you. So if you have any questions for Dr. Pavan, you can just make a note and ask to him. I would just like to ask one thing because you are into consulting. Generally, they say ideas are cheap, implementation is costly. So how do you as a consultant measure the creativity or measure an idea and advise your consultant regarding the same?
Okay, so the only thing more powerful than an idea is the idea executed. And that's where we often celebrate creativity, whereas what we need to understand is that then the Google economy ideas are really too many. The premium is in execution. Now, how do we measure these three things? So we have three simple measures, and I would strongly advise you to start thinking about measuring things and not simply generating stuff. Input measure, process measure, output measure. Input measure. Input measure talks about how many ideas per employee is generated, period. Ideas per employee. You can look at a unit of observation, could be week, month, year, but ideas per employee. When you are generating ideas, never ever try to scrutinize ideas whether they are good or bad at the time of generating ideas. Because today's stupid idea might be tomorrow's reality. For example, 2 years back, nobody thought that I would be booking my taxi to the airport while I'm sipping coffee with my bags packed. We used to book our taxis to the airport at least 1 day in advance, 2 years back. Today, when we are all set is when we book the taxis. So today what is ridiculous might be tomorrow's norm. So entertain that, set the input measure, ideas per employee. The second is experiments per dollar. And that's what Thomas Edison said, that I define my life on how many experiments can I pack in a given day. So are you doing experiments on a daily basis as an individual, as an organization? That's the second measure, how many experiments you're doing. And the third outcome is revenue generated. I would never ever want to take our eyes off from generating revenues, including if you're a social enterprise. A social enterprise or a social entrepreneurship, we should never ever take our eyes away from being self-viable, being profitable. You can never ever run a capitalistic system with a socialistic mentality. So you may be a profit-making enterprise, you might be a non-profit-making enterprise. You should have to make money. Keep that in mind. So that is as far as the measurement goes. And the point about what do I insist in my consulting engagements, I've been consulting for the last 13 years now with corporates, and what I have always learned in organizations is that one is for startups and second is for large enterprises. For startups, my 2 cents is that for a successful organization, you need disciplined entrepreneurship. Unfortunately, I see less discipline, more entrepreneurship in startups. And for the large organizations, I see more discipline and less entrepreneurship for large organizations. So we can get the balance of discipline and entrepreneurship together. I think we will be far better off. And if there is any place in this country where this can potentially happen, it has to be this particular city. So that's my take on measurement and discipline.
Thanks a lot. So any questions for Dr. Pavan?
Good morning to everybody. My name is Parameswaran. I was working for an Indian multinational insurance company spread over in 28 countries as facilitator of HRD. My question is to Dr. Pavan, and the question is, you was telling nobody is serious except the person who is thinking of that. And in my own way of thinking, seriousness and sincerity works together. Could you explain?
No, there is not much to explain. They work together.
But the person has to be sincere. A sincere person will always be serious.
Not necessary. I don't think so.
Because the net result comes from perseverance and continuous effort only.
Absolutely. So one of the words which I was talking about when it comes to idea generation was slow hunch. Slow hunch. One of the biggest myths that we've been harboring about, 2 myths that we've been harboring about creativity. The first big myth that we've been harboring about creativity is originality. Originality. There is nothing called original. Very subconsciously, we are all seeking ideas from outside, very subconsciously. What our mind exactly? Very subconsciously. And what our mind is doing is we are assimilating the known and unknown patterns. That's what we are trying to do. We are assimilating the known and unknown patterns. So the genius of your mind is not about receiving information, but by reconfiguring the information in unknown patterns. So the pattern is novel, not the input. That's the first point. And the second point is another big myth of creativity is eureka. Right from the apple falling on Newton's head to the Archimedes jumping naked from his bathtub and yelling eureka, eureka, these are nothing more and nothing less than urban legends. When you have an idea, it is in a meditative state, what we call as a slow hunch. Small number of things take a lot amount of time for these things to come together, and when that combination comes, which is new to your head, is when you think to your mind it is eureka. But back home it was mulling over for quite a while. Or the cool who came up with this helical model of benzene where the snake bites its proverbial tail. All these things where you sleep over a problem. So long story short, my 2 cents here would be passionate about problems and be flexible about ideas. Or to say that flirt with ideas. Very, very critical. Because if you are so hooked up on a particular idea and if there are people coming to you saying that there might be a better way of solving the same problem, you'll be vehement. And most often than not, serious businesses fail because they aren't too much open to their ideas being proven wrong at the early stage in the game. So that's a long answer to a short question. I hope it does justice.
Thank you.
So you can shout. Try.
Your words were very inspiring, and everybody's words were very inspiring. As Dr. Pavan, you have to leave. I would like to seek some insights into how does your day look like, which makes you what you are today. And I know you will be giving me a short answer, but that's more inspiring because we all want to do divergent thinking. We all want to learn new words to share ideas. But language is very insufficient as of now. Because in the last 100 years, there are like around 20,000 new words which were never there before. And the next 100 years, 20 to 40,000 new words and definitions will be there. So how do you work on your day? It doesn't have to be too complex, but...
So if something was inspiring so far, this is not. But let me give it a shot.
Okay.
3 things which I want to offer, and this might be very useful. I'm assuming this might be very useful to you. First thing is have rules of thumb in your life.
Okay.
Have very clear rules of thumb. Which means for every request, every submission, every question that comes to you, your mind, you should not start thinking from first principles, have rules of thumb. And my rule of thumb has been this Venn diagram. First of all, know what you're passionate about. Now we've been using this word passion quite loosely, slippery slope, but let me give you a working definition of what is passion. Passion is something that you do and you continue to do without any external incentive. That's passion. AKA, passion is something that you do when you don't feel tired. That's passion. The second thing you do know is what are you best at? If I ask you this question that of all the 50 odd people present in the room, can you say for sure that this is something that you can beat everybody down on? Know that and work towards that. It can be anything. It can be singing, cooking, dancing, composing, teaching, motivating people, organizing HR interviews, whatever else it is, but you should say for sure that this is what I'm better than anybody else in the room. 9 out of 10 times I'm better than that. And the third thing is money. When passion converges with what you are best at, which is called as mastery, and then you can also make money on, this sweet spot is called profession. This is called profession. And the moment your passion becomes one with your profession, there is no stopping you. You will be in a state of what Mihail Csikszentmihalyi, what Partha was talking to you about. The word is called flow. You're in a state of flow, which Mihail Csikszentmihalyi says that creative people comes at a state of flow when you become one with the task. For example, right now I'm talking to you, I feel like I'm 2 inches elevated above the floor. So that is where, and I'm happy that I'm lucky sheer that I've just been convinced. The second thing which I've heard, and this can be perhaps the most controversial statement that I'm making today, and that's the reason I'll exit soon after, so that I need not face any question. It's absolutely controversial, the statement which I'm going to make here, but let's see. Since I have the mic, I can make the controversial statement. Here is a statement. This might be quite, since you of ask about the routine, etc. Okay. Career, family, friends. And since we are on record, I know it might hurt me later on, but it might be because I strongly think this is the case. Choose to. Choose to. That's what has helped me enormously. Choose to. It's foolhardy to think that you can be excellent at all three. If you have to be excellent, choose to. Make a choice. Because every choice, as you would realize eventually in your life, every choice has a cost, and if you are not willing to pay the price of that particular choice, and I don't think you have made it right. So that's my short story. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Just to summarize in 3 points what he has told us about how to generate ideas. First, doubt the default. Once you doubt what is the mundane thing, you will break that mundane and you will get creative ideas. Have maximum affiliation, because the more you interact with people, the more you do work, you will get ideas. And last but not the least, if you are an entrepreneur or if you are working somewhere, be a disciplined entrepreneur. I think these were the 3 takeaways for me. Thanks a lot, Pavan, and we will just ask Partha to handle it.
Pavan, we have a small token of affection from the Alumni Office for you. Thank you so much for having come today.
So we will move on. I will just ask one opening questions to all of them, and then the floor is open to all of you. We spoke a lot about idea creation, idea generation, but do you think in today's schools, in today's curriculum, today's workspace, are we creating the right environment for the students and the employees to really dwell upon their imagination, creativity, and come up with new ideas?
Yes, this is open. More and more, I think we are. And I think that it's also, sometimes it comes from wanting to do it, wanting to be different. Sometimes it comes from the fact that there is no other way. Corporates have begun to realize more and more. I work with a lot of corporates because of the messaging that I do for them. And there is premium on creativity. There is premium on ideas. The sieving process of what I call in a corporate of who people who, you know, and Pavan said that, right? We're looking for marks and intelligence versus creativity, and creativity is at its premium. What separates people, what separates an employee is he doing what he is doing more, is he more entrepreneurial in his approach, even if he's not actually running the company. In his function, has he been entrepreneurial? Has he been creative? Has he been able to bust a couple of myths? Has he been able to come up with a solution to a problem that was perceived by the company? In schools, I see that more and more also. Of course, you know, multiple intelligence, etc., is like the buzzword now. Everyone knows that for many, many years. But again, my kids go to a fairly progressive school. I see more and more that schools, while they do realize, and it's interesting because in a sense we are old school now, right? Even though we're sitting on a panel and talking about ideas, we are old school parents. We are old school everything. And the kids can teach us a lot these days. But schools are now saying, yes, marks are important, and in fact trying to tell a parent body, listen, don't worry, we've got it covered. We've got the subjects covered, but we also need to make them world ready. And I think that that's happening. That's really, really happening, at least in the few schools that I see the kids going to from in and around my area. I do see little things, an outreach program, not making it only about your achievement, also carrying someone else with you, you know, whether it's an outreach program, it's a change maker program, it's an entrepreneurship program. Schools are now realizing that, okay, here's the bottom line. A kid goes into class at 3.5 or 4 now, preschool, and comes out at 18 or 19. you are actually putting your child in school, and the school is taking the child not knowing what the future is going to be in 18 years, in 14 years, if the child was 4. That's the level of unpredictability in our world. We don't know. Earlier, we knew we wanted to get our engineers out. We knew we needed doctors. We've sort of sorted those problems. We have people for that, and we're hoping that more are coming in for that also. But now, what are the challenges of our modern world? What are the problems that need to be solved in our modern world? Are unpredictable. There is an unpredictability factor, and schools are actually trying to get kids out that will be the future managers, the future problem solvers, the future thinkers of this unknown world. And if they don't have creativity, if they don't actually facilitate difference and creativity and individuality and problem solving and design thinking, all of these buzzwords that are sort of buzzing around for all of us, then really what are they there for? And I think the schools are beginning to now realize that, and so are companies. I think companies are really, really sort of, a lot of companies, if they stand out, they're actually standing out because they're doing this.
Thank you. Moving on with, now we have seen that an environment is given. That is what, as per Anju, we came to know that workspace is also giving an environment. But do you think internet and digitalization is somewhere impacting our creativity?
Is that a question for me specifically?
No, anybody can take it.
I was just, I'll give you a simple example. Just my personal example, I used to do Zentangles, right? It's filling up space with intricate patterns. And the only way you can get it right is by being completely focused in the here and now. If your mind wanders, the pattern's broken, right? Now that was a very meditative, lovely process for myself, and I was very happy with my art, the connect with the universe. Then someone told me, hey, do you have an Instagram handle? I said, no, I don't. And I got onto Instagram. Someone said, do you know about DeviantArt? I said, what's DeviantArt? They said, that's where artists go. Then I went on to DeviantArt, right? And there are artists from Siberia. There's a gentleman from the UK who's in South Africa, who's an animal rights conservationist, who also does Zentangle art. He came to me and he said, what you should try? You just do black and white. I think you need a splash of color. This other lady who was in Ethiopia working with kids there had another suggestion. So I think the digital impact, like making the world flat, I think that also is about 15 years old now, that term. But it's so true. You get friends, you get inspiration, you get advice, you get connected to people all over the world, right? Those barriers are completely removed. It's just a matter of going there and, like he was saying, having a thick skin, saying, this is my work, I'm putting it up here, and I'm open to suggestions and feedback. I think you get feedback from some of the best in the world, which would have been impossible even 10 years ago, right? So it's brilliant, I think, yeah.
Sort of expanding on what she's saying, taking off from what she's saying, when you build a community for yourself, and the fact that the internet lets you build that community for yourself, no matter where you are, what time zone, how old, who you are, what your beliefs are, some of that, of course, translates into your work, but really it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you are connected. We are all connected in such a manner that you can actually literally bounce off each other's work and learn and learn and learn and learn. Yes, the internet can be the downfall of, I was just talking to them offline when we were sitting over there and saying, oh my God, the kids are so hooked onto it. They don't even really want to have a real conversation with people. They'd rather have a conversation online than have a conversation. But I think that that's a phase. I hope. I have to believe that that's a phase. But I really think what the internet, and we need to look at that, and we need to highlight that. A lot of times people actually, there's a lot of internet bashing going around. There's a lot of social media bashing going around. It's farcical. It dilutes messaging. Yes, it can do all of that. Can we use it for better? That is the question we need to actually ask. Can we use it for better? The answer is a resounding yes.
So maybe to summarize, or maybe just to make my understanding clear, I think initially we were protecting the idea, because if you look at maybe 10 years back, because I am from professional thing, we used to copyright. So if I had an idea, I used to hesitate to tell to somebody because I used to fear that the idea would be leaked and somebody else will take forward and they will do the research and get a PhD I will not get. So we were protecting the idea, but with internet, we are connecting the ideas. That is what I feel. So I might have stopped my imagination at one process. Somebody takes it forward and the ideas are connected. So with that, internet being a boon and digitalization really playing, I just had one doubt, because that is my personal thing. Humiliation of rejection makes me stop generating ideas. So I would like Professor to just talk about what really makes someone stop imagining or creating ideas.
Yeah, before that, very interesting conversation just before that. I thought let me add to a few interesting points to what they're already talking about. Also connected, there's a historical context to the idea of internet and what it does to creative environments. Here's some interesting information for you. When humans, the oldest stone flakes that we had, the human beings used to have stone flakes. You had these stones, etc. That was long time ago. And for how long did they have stone flakes before the next invention took place? Human beings, not the Homo sapiens, I'm talking about the human beings, Australopithecus or Zinzanthropus, I don't know, but it took them 1.4 million years to come out of using stone flakes and move into a stone axe. And you know how long did the stone axe invention last? 6 lakh years. 6 lakh years. These days you have inventions every 10-15 days, things change. 40,000 years ago, the Homo sapiens are believed to have appeared in Africa. That's the time they started inventing these tools which they could actually throw from a distance at animals, right? So that they invented spears and all that kind of stuff. And also you had the germination of art. People started drawing and expressing themselves through art in caves. The point I'm making is, one of the things that has helped in propagation of ideas, the creative ideas, is when people get together. So when you're in isolated communities, you're pretty limited in terms of the idea generation. Internet actually creates that space for people to meet and share. There's an interesting experiment that was actually held sometime back, trying to understand what are the creative environments that scientists go through when they have these nice, lovely ideas. And what they discovered that was that these ideas don't come in the labs. They actually come when people meet over coffee and tea in coffee shops. When the idea of coffee shop, for example, that's why you have coffee day, right? So there's another parallel interesting story to it is something you must have read about the Medici effect. Has anyone read the book on Medici effect by Franz Johansson? So where they talk about the creative environments, where one of the best ways to promote creativity is to have people from diverse cultures and backgrounds to get them to meet in a place. This happens during the Renaissance period in Italy, and that's why you have the Medici effect. That continues to hold true, and the internet has probably enabled that. More people get to air ideas and exchange ideas, exchange hunches, which actually helps that cause. Now coming to the point that you actually very too tempting to be talking about other things, right? And there is something else. I thought I should mention this before I'm just jotted down. The idea of creativity as a skill in the schooling system. The World Economic Forum has identified creativity as a 21st century skill that is mandated for schools. Right, so that's one more pointer for you in terms of how important creativity is. Just some time back I mentioned about in the schooling system, if you want to create an environment that is conducive for learning, it's already happening. If you go to a play home, you have a lot of colorful pictures. That's one of the idea of colorful pictures is to ensure that children are in a relaxed state in terms of emotional states. So you want to give them an environment where they are able to explore without any tension. And I also mentioned about conformity in schools, where there is a proclivity towards getting into the median. So and what happens there is, if you want to promote independent thinking, it's a challenge. When as parents, for example, your child comes and tells you, "Father, how does the airplane work?" What do? We start off with a Gyan session, right? Gravity, drag, thrust, and all that stuff. And then you start talking about helicopters. You don't let the children think. Yeah, we are very quick to get into answers. So we do it on day-to-day basis. If a child comes with the question, you say, "Hey, hold on, let me Google," and then there you are, right? So independent thinking. Now coming to the point of, I think the main point, what is it? You mentioned something about humiliation.
Humiliation of rejection that makes us stop our thinking.
Yeah. So what is it that stops people from expressing themselves or getting creative? I think these are belief systems. Humiliation, for example, is a sense of, he mentioned some time back about ridicule. I think he used the word ridicule. If someone ridicules you, it means that you're being creative, and that's why people can't tolerate you. That it's a badge of honor, so to speak. But that apart, the issue is more in terms of what kind of belief systems you have. If I believe that I am not good at something, I can't do this. Or if I think I'm not up to this challenge, these are the kind of, I'm not good enough, what will people think of me? And these are the kind of things that stop you from doing something. So the belief systems are the ones that actually limit our growth. And there are various techniques to get over our own limiting beliefs. Yeah.
So can I just add, sorry, go ahead. No, I was just saying, we were talking about schools, and really it will bode us well to look into the future, in a sense that we are living our lives, but we are also wondering how we can make it better for the next generation. And some of the next generation may be here, and they're thinking of the next generation, which are kids then, right? While we talk about a belief system, I think, and I think the schools and colleges and in fact even corporates are doing that. Building resilience is just something that has come to the fore now, and I see more and more, and I am a huge believer in that also. Building resilience of whether it's a child, whether it's youth, or whether it's yourself, the fact that today, more and more, we are now turning the thinking of, and I'm going to now talk about the Indian household, really, because most of us are in that context. The context is often Indian, we've all grown up in that kind of society, etc., is that we were not allowed to fail. The fact that now more and more it is all right to fail in an entrepreneurial environment. In fact, we say fail as many times as you want, and fail quicker, learn from those lessons, and then move on. So the fact that we are now beginning to look at failure as a teaching will build that resilience. And therefore, if we can actually keep that environment alive, and these are good introspection points for ourselves, the question that you asked, the glare of the internet, I say something and 20 people slap me down and say, "You're talking rubbish." And if 2 people come up and say, "You know what? I think you've got something there." Speak up. Speak up, be heard, be part of, build that tribe, build that community if you can do it. These are really good inflection points for each one of us to be thinking of what happens when a great idea is slapped down.
I just had a small add-on. I think there are 2 distinguishing factors, right? There's one with the ego, right? So when somebody does not like something, when someone says that's not a good idea, what gets hurt is the ego. And how you react to it sort of determines where you go in terms of your ego. Then there's the connection that you feel with the universe when you do something spectacular, right? Like he was saying, 2 inches off the ground. That I believe, if you believe in the word soul, you could replace it with anything else, is your connect with the universe. Your souls connect with the universe. And that's not dependent on anybody else saying anything else. For those fraction of seconds or minutes, you have a deep connect with the universe that nobody can rub off. But when I feel bad, it is my ego reacting to what somebody else thinks, and that's usually temporary. But what she was saying was absolutely right, how resilient you are and how you actually face that sort of makes it a success or failure in the terms of the ego. But that connect cannot be taken away no matter what anybody else thinks.
Thanks a lot. So now we throw upon the questions for the audience, and there are also certain participants who are connected with us online. So we would like to take their questions also. So first we will open it to you. Keep the questions as short as possible. Let it be a statement. Yeah. If you are loud enough, you can just start talking without waiting for the mic.
Hello, this is Pradeep. Anybody can answer this. Does intellect or the basic intellect have anything to do with the creativity? Does it? I mean, it has to. You need a basic level of intellect to do anything, execute things, ideate, anything.
I'm not a prof. No, I'm not a prof, incidentally. I don't teach, but then, okay. Knowledge is very important. When you talk about creativity, some of the things that are very important and factors that really help in the creative process is knowledge, attitude, right, imagination, right, culture, habitat, resources. So all these things are very important. And when you talk about intellect, I'm assuming you're talking about knowledge. IQ, I think he mentioned. So IQ, just because you score well in IQ test doesn't mean you're creative. Or just because you don't score good enough in IQ test doesn't mean you're not creative. Because the creative elements are very different from how you measure intelligence. And in terms of measurement of intelligence also, I think you mentioned about, we call it, there's a name to it. It's called Turing's test. Turing's test of creativity, where we check out how many ideas have generated, how diverse are the ideas, and how original are the ideas. And there are also other ways of measuring creativity, divergent thinking, Guilford divergent thinking test, creative writing, people measure that. So that's the measurement part. But essentially, intelligence is not really, it's no linear kind of a proportional relationship with creativity. That's my short answer.
I'm going to lean in on that. Of course, over here we're talking, more about the corporate, more about the but I'm talking about society per se. I think, of course, intelligence. If somebody is doing things intelligently, I'm sure that there's more premium to it. But can you also do anything you do more creatively? And therefore, in my mind, the difference is intellect and intent. You may have the intellect to do something, but you don't have the intent to do it, then you've not carried out that thing creatively. But if you had the intellect and you also had the intent to do something creatively, it could be anything. And when I say, it could be cooking, it could be setting out a plate, it could be thinking of the next big thing, the next Google. Will it come out of India? Will it come out of Bangalore? Whatever that is, the big and the small, and that's why I'm sort of drawing the so many different and varied examples. If the intent is there, I think then therefore you begin to think more creatively. Does that answer your question, Dave?
And here's something you wanted to add. What happens in intelligent test is usually a convergent thinking test. You are trying to understand if someone can solve a problem. Whereas in creativity, it's about divergent thinking. How do you generate possibilities? So there is a distinct difference in terms of the way you think and how do you measure intelligence. Yeah.
Culture. So I would request you also to go a little creative with my question. Now I will also include Dr. Pavan, Soni. When we say idea, and we also look at the money. So I have seen the ideas going very, very flimsy, where everybody is asking, will your idea make money? Is it already making money? That is the first question. Whenever you come up with an idea, go to somebody, he first says, are you already making money? So my request would be, kindly go creative and see when this mindset will come off over people, when real ideas will be able to actually go into the experimentation, and after that, see whether they are really working or not. Otherwise, we remain just flimsy, copying the Ola and going like Ola and going like Flipkart. Thank you.
I think very often people who ask that question are venture capitalists who are putting their money in. So they don't want to put in their money and not get something in return. That's one way of looking at it. But companies like Google, etc., give you a 20% off. So you can take 20% off your working week to actually experiment. And then there is no ROI calculated on that. A lot of R&D in organizations also work that way, where it's depreciated over a long period of time, where you don't expect returns within the year or the next year or whatever, right? So that's in the corporate context. Startups, typically when you go for seed funding, they want to know how's your, should I put my money in or not? Because otherwise I'm going to be wasting my money. And typically you see that coming from there. But there are examples like Google. Even in Adobe, we actually have a 20% off for employees. Time taken just for research, where we don't ask you for how good is your idea, how is this useful to us, is it going to make money for us? And we've had some brilliant ideas coming out of those as well, not measured. Oh, absolutely.
When are we going to give them space? Creative idea, but after 2 years you come to know it was not brilliant, but it was great. So that's my question. Just tell us where will it go? When it will be here? For 30 years I was working and collecting these ideas. So there is a time when we want to actually do them. And so many people must be waiting for that day.
Well, quite honestly, when you talk about idea generation, what you're talking about is the execution and commercial viability of an idea, which is a totally different conversation. When you're talking about idea generation, imagination, and creativity, and what happens to an idea in terms of the utility of an idea from whose point of view, and how much money they're willing to pay, and what is the industry structure and stuff like that, you're going into a totally different terrain. And quite honestly, I wouldn't know in how many years would an idea become commercial viability. Well, you don't even know what idea you're talking about. 2 years, 5 years. So I didn't quite get the question. I mean,
there's a book called Jugaad Innovation, which talks about all of the innovations that Indians have done specifically. I'd urge you to please read that book. There are many, many examples of little villages in India when they've done things indigenously, not done anywhere in the world before, because the problem is very specific to India, and they've commercialized it in their own small ways. So you might want to just read that book. It's called Jugaad Innovations.
Okay. Yeah, maybe to take this conversation a little further, this topic was for idea creation. Like in IIMB, you have the NSRCL, which does the incubation. So an idea, when it comes, the person goes to the incubation cell and they support them for the first 6 months, and this idea is taken into commercial use. So maybe this topic can be taken offline, and I think the professors would be able to guide you in that line. But in Indian context, right, both from in the college and curriculum and also in the workspace, we have started creating platforms for people to be creative and to generate their ideas. And even in the colleges and in curriculum, they have the placement cell where they are enabling the children, the students, to build on their idea and make it commercially feasible. It has already started, and maybe you can have an offline discussion with NSRCL, which helps you to make this idea a reality and take it forward. So can we have another question, please? Yeah.
I've always believed that when you have an idea and you're confident about it, that confidence actually to some extent leads to the idea from going into generation from the generation stage to a completion stage. Wanted to know your views on this.
Okay, one of the, let me see if I understood the question properly. See, one of the traits that is very important in terms of, with respect to creativity is a personality trait. When you talk about personality trait, you're talking about confidence. How confident you are as a person. What is the attitude towards innovation? About encountering new problems. Are you open to open-ended questions? Yeah, exploring, right? So in terms of rejection, what happens is the question of whether you want to defer judgment. You know, there's something that even Pavan, Soni, someone mentioned about it. So you don't evaluate an idea. Suppose you're on the other side of the table, so you can practice it. You don't want to evaluate an idea whether it's good, bad, ugly. You just want to take an idea as it is and just jot it down, however bizarre the idea might be. So you defer judgment when it comes to a creative process in terms of idea generation. Because if not, what happens is people will get into the shell and they will no longer be willing to share if you start criticizing all the time. So I'm not sure if I understood the question.
My question was, if you as a generator of an idea doesn't completely believe in it, how are you going to make other people?
So yeah, that's an issue. That's an issue.
No, you might have an idea, but you're not sure if it's feasible.
Just talk to people. No? Just talk to people, get feedback, understand. That's the self-confidence. The confidence is a skill, vis-a-vis self-esteem. So it's just a skill, and that skill you can build when you start interacting with people. You get feedback. It's a feedback loop. You become more confident of what you're actually talking about.
That was the bit I had said about idea as a network. Think of it as a network rather than in isolation.
Thank you.
Just to add to this, so we all come up with an idea. We have an intent to pursue something. We have a goal in mind. Now, I'm curious to know if we have any known techniques to engage with other ideators and how to get the best out of it in a very organized, structured, and time-bound way. If something from your experience, if you could share, it will be very helpful.
Don't have an organized, structured way, but I think the more you air an idea, the more it grows from all angles. The more robust it gets, the more energy it gets, the more healthy it gets. Or you reject it because it didn't pass the test of all of those things, and you carry on. But I really think that you can't be sitting in isolation with an idea. I mean, I'm going back to what she said. You can't be sitting over there and saying, I have a great idea. Yeah, so?
That's exactly. So I have an
I mean, what are we going to do about that?
Yeah.
And what are we going to do about that is begin to talk to people about that, begin to test that idea. If you want a scientific way, do a pilot, do a test on that idea, begin to sort of, throw it open to a few people, see what their reactions are, see the feasibility of that idea. But these are very logical sort of things. Are you looking for, what are you looking
some experience you guys have in the past? See, like when you say air the idea, and there are a lot of people, they will have 100 meanings of that air the idea. Like I go on LinkedIn, I post on Facebook, I go on a Saturday coffee shop. What does that
talk
mean?
to people in your who you trust. Mostly, even before you actually take it out. A lot of times we what is the right word? We underestimate family and friends. I think a lot of people like to sort of take their ideas outside. I say test it in the drawing room, test it on the dining table.
You can actually crowdsource ideas. I mean, there are companies in the tech field where ideas, if you do things on your own, it may take years. there are ideas which come in a couple of months. You get thousands of people who are willing to contribute, and especially in the IT space, people are more than willing to express themselves. Yeah, open source. You have when companies which, I forget the name of the company, some of you might be able to recall. I think it's called Big Idea or something. So in the US, IDEOs, you know, through the IDEOs. So what these guys do is they go to various cities in the US and they generate ideas from common people in terms of how do you design toys. So, you know, so you can crowdsource ideas. Imagine a innovation department in your company and you have 5 guys sitting out there. The same 5 guys are just discussing how many ideas can you keep generating. So you can, you need to use a judgment in terms of how to get more people to, because there are other risks there also, right? Commercial risks are there.
But divergent thinking is one way to do it, I think.
Yeah, you can use tools. You have the Edward D. Bono, 6 Thinking Hats, and you have so many tools available to you, divergent thinking tools that can help you in terms of generating ideas.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. I just wanted to make a point which is covering a couple of points which that gentleman had actually pointed out, and the lady over here, the fear of rejection and all that. See, my direct point is that there are 2 types of ideas. One is an idea which is a creative idea. For example, what next big thing is there to replace bread? Okay, that is one type of idea, which is creative idea. We don't know when it will be adopted, or the battery generated cars. We don't know when it will be adopted. The second thing is an idea which solves an actual problem, a real problem. For example, in recession days, Uber and Airbnb are 2 examples which actually arose in the recession days. So Uber arose because people had cars which were free. There were not much of utility of the cars, so they brought it into a system where people can actually use their cars for commercial purpose. That solved a problem. Airbnb was, you have a room, you have an air mattress, and you can provide bread and breakfast in the morning. That solved a problem. People could actually stay in those rooms at a very minimal cost. So there's something that solves a problem, can catch on more directly, and can actually bring in commercial success also. There are some creative things which can be, can be millions of ideas, but will they solve a problem or not? That is for an individual to think about it. And as Sudha had rightly pointed out, NSRCL is there. You can go and discuss your ideas, or you can go and even share the ideas over the website and see there will be some mentor allocated to you. So probably you can test check whether your idea will bring a commercial success or whether your idea is just a creative idea, whether it may not solve a problem, but it's just an idea. That's all.
When you talk about creativity, you're also talking about, which is what I think he defined, Pavan Soni defined at the beginning, in terms of what is creativity. It's an idea which has value. It's not just an idea in itself. I go to the kitchen and I cook something which no one likes, it's not a great creative idea. So it has to be value to whom? Value to me or value to others? Intuitively value to others. It makes sense to someone else. And only then the idea is creative. And here when he talks about solving problems, so you're creating value for someone. So the idea that evolves by solving problems has a much better success rate in terms of a commercial viability, you know. I guess that's what he's saying.
At least in the short run. Because an abstract idea could actually be tomorrow's solution for something.
Yeah, that's the imagination part, which I said relativity. I don't have a physical experience with relativity. I can sit in the room and I can come out with frameworks and models, and it can be useful at some point in time.
Yeah, I had a question. This is related to social media, like you all spoke about, that the more inspiration that you get from connecting with new people and looking at different things. Nowadays with social media, it's just that I go on Instagram and it's a lot of input. So I look at that, I look at this, I look at this. And at the end of the day, I want to create something that I've seen. So my idea would be an amalgamation of everything that I've seen rather than something new. So when I say new idea, I think most of us think of something that's never been conceived ever before. So like they say, you can never think of a color or a face of a person that you haven't seen. So everything is something more of an inspiration. So does a new idea base more upon spending time with yourself and mulling over things, or is it just about inputs and piecing it together to create something new?
There are many ways, creative methods in terms of generating ideas. So one of the things is what we refer to as reapplication. Reapplication, there is always already an object that is being used for a particular purpose. Now you see something in it where you can probably use it for something else. Let me give you a simple example. I have a simple thing like a paper clip. A paper clip can be, if I sharpen the edges, I can make it, turn it into a screwdriver for removing screws on my mobile, right? So where you reapply a particular principle that you've seen, and most of it is to do with reapplication. You don't have to really invent anything new. Where you're able to synthesize what you see around you into something where the utility, you can use it for some other purpose. So there are many other creative processes. One of them is reapplication. Another one is evolution. Evolution is incremental ideas. It doesn't have to be one great idea that comes flashing and some big change that you make. Most of it is incremental. One is revolutionary ideas also. They are there. For example, the kind of questions you might ask are very different. A professor in a classroom can say, how can I make my lecture more interesting? So that's an evolutionary way of looking at a problem. A revolutionary way of looking at the problem is you don't require teachers. The students can teach each other. Where's a question of having a lecturer there, right? So that is totally revolutionary, totally different way of looking at teaching and learning. So you have many ways.
I've heard this really good example of you can be good in one sphere, you can be good in another, and then you can think of a combination that never existed. So an example is, I don't know if you follow XKCD comics online. They're hugely popular, right? So when it came out first, there were funny people. There were stand-up comedians who could, take a joke and who could take a crowd along. There are really good mathematicians who can explain things, graphs, quadratic equations. There was nobody who put the two together. So all this gentleman did was do humor in the form of graphs, right? He brought two domains, which is mathematics and humor together, and he was hugely popular. And I can think of many, many examples like that where you bring in combinations that did not exist to create something entirely new. But there was inspiration by looking around, by looking at digital media, also a lot of times with self-introspection. Maybe I was meditating and I got this aha moment of, I'll combine these two. But even combination sometimes is new, right?
We will take just one last question, and they are available offline. You can interact with them, networking. Please catch hold of them, don't leave them. So one last question before we wind up.
It's for me? Okay. Yeah, questioning skills is something that you can actually develop. How is a process question, right? How do you do something as an open-ended question? And it enables you to generate a lot of possibilities. How did you come across a solution? How do we arrive at, how do you deliver, let's say you're in e-commerce, okay, right? How do I deliver a package to a remote village in Orissa, right? The how question is very interesting. When you're criticizing, for example, if someone is making a presentation and you don't agree with them, I think this question has come up earlier. So criticizing and ridicule, how do you phrase your question? Is the why did you do that is one thing. And saying, how can we do it differently? There's another way to put the same question. Right? So the how question is very important, and it's very useful too. What? What is it that you're doing that is so that is important for you? Right? That's also another way to put it. Non-threatening way of eliciting answers. Why? You can use it sparingly, unless and until you're talking about why the airplane flies. That's okay. But why do you do something attacking the identity or indirectly attacking the identity of a person is a no-no. It's not going to give you any responses that are going to be useful. Yeah. Where, when, how.
So anybody has any queries for the panelists? They are available. Okay. Thank you. So we heard from the esteemed panelists that getting ideas is not something God gifted. You can create it, you can have it on your own, you can learn it. It is not a flash of insight like you just go to the bathtub, sleep there for some time and come out running eureka. If you are planning to do that, please ensure that you are wearing some towel. If you get that insight, flash of insight of eureka moment and you run around. So each one of us are creative by ourselves and we have it inbuilt. Women are more innovative. That's what Dr. Pavan said. I'm feeling really happy that 3 women panelists are sitting here. So yes, we knew that. Only it was just fact finding was done today. We knew about it. So I think most of you got some insight about where ideas come from. And just to leave and thank the panelists for all the wonderful answers they gave to all our doubts and the way they cleared our doubts to get more ideas. I think India will be the next innovative hub and other countries are going to come here to get and steal our ideas. Thank you. With that, thank you all the panelists. We had a wonderful time and audience, you were wonderful. Thank you.